Chapter 5, Evangelism. And Jesus came and said to them, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age." Matthew 28, 18-20, English Standard Version. Those 3 verses out of Matthew's Gospel have been the bedrock for evangelists in nearly every church, and that's serious about sharing the gospel for years. So much so that many of us, and yes, I count myself among the evangelists, have misplaced a word and focused too hard on the others with impunity, and that word is disciples. And while it's very easy to get passionate while preaching or excited while praising, discipleship sounds like work. It is, however, biblical and necessary part of evangelism, as we read in Paul's letter to the Romans. For the scriptures say, "Everyone who believes in him will not be put to shame. For there is no distinction between Jew or Greek, for the same Lord is Lord of all, bestowing his riches on all who call on him. For everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. How then will they call on him if they have not believed? How then are they to believe in whom that they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach good news. But they have not all obeyed the gospel. For Isaiah says, Lord, who has believed what he has heard from us? So faith comes from hearing, and hearing through the word of Christ. Romans 10, 11-17, English Standard Version. There is an inherent application in the teaching that comes with the sharing of the gospel. One that is easily produced in a preaching environment is avoided when the stage or pulpit is placed in priority over the unsaved hearing the good news. A single pastor cannot be the only person sharing the gospel in a community. It has to be a commonplace thing in the congregation of the church in order for people to respond to the good news and for the church to grow. Ideally, every member should be searching for people to share the gospel with. While some may excel at the sharing part because of a personality or gifting, everyone should have a handle on the disciple part, a solid knowledge of Christ's work for us on the cross and the effects of his grace on the person's lives are key areas for any Christian to have. Traditionally, however, the focus on evangelism has always been towards building and a stage. We have the great work of evangelists like Billy Graham, who through his crusade ministry has seen thousands of people come to Christ, all because of a building, a tent, a church, or a stadium, and a pulpit where he could preach. Local pastors can do the same by inviting people to an outreach service. This picture of evangelism, outside the exceptional personality-driven individual, has always been one of, if I have to, I will, but let me lead you to a professional. That's actually not a bad thing when you think about it. When you have to nail the presentation of the gospel with a close family member because you know it means their life would change forever, would you trust you if you didn't have to? If you could have Rabbi Zacharias or Billy Graham talk to your neighbors about Christ, would you tap out just to save on your lacking apologetic prowess and lack of social skills? It sounds horrible, but the real life reality is that people can be scared of speaking to other people, even more so when they have to speak to people because they've declared something to be true and that they need to prove. Saying you're a Christian these days means automatically having to defend all of Christendom from every armchair atheist that reads a Hitchens book. The attention of having to evangelize to a possibly unresponsive crowd is legitimately scary, so we default to professionals. And people still get saved. Taking a friend or a loved one to a church service intended for the presentation of the gospel is a good thing. But again, we come to the question of how effective is it? Could we do better? This is where the internet changes evangelism. The claim of objective truth are far cry from being commonplace on the web, but the very nature of the internet's communication and presentation of facts, figures, and history allow for a new kind of evangelism to exist. You see, people don't just see or hear things on the internet, they search for them. Before the days of search engines, content on the internet could only be accessed by knowing the specific website's information address you wanted to visit, or by following a link. The World Wide Web used to even have a printed directory available of all websites that wasn't much bigger than your average local Yellow Pages, believe it or not. This was a very, very crude form of the web compared to today, but it was the invention of the search engine. While there was still used to be a competition in search engines back in the 90s, Google's dominance led to a unique habitat present in all internet users. We Google things. So much so now that by the default, the address bar at the top of our web browser will default to a search engine of our choice should we enter an invalid website address or URL. This wasn't always the case. You used to have to go to a search engine first to search for things, and now we have entire web browsers built around the concept that everything on the internet is searched for. This makes it nearly everything that happens online an active thing instead of a passive viewing or hearing, even attending. Out of a friend or family-based guilt, the internet by default is active in a way very few things are. Even on websites that curate content based on subscriptions, we generally have to set preferences and subscriptions to follow what we want to see. Almost everything can be accessed on the internet has to be accessed via active pursuit or choice. This ingraining of the agency of man makes the online world in every form a conversation in one way or the other. Every Google search is asking the collective content of the internet what best matches for those search terms. Every subscription is asking the creator for their collected post's work. Every follow is asking for the notifications of the artist's or personality's online life, and each time these actions or questions are quietly asked because we type in a keyword or click a button to view the same. There are no soapboxes to stand on the internet, no sandwich boards to wear in public places. Everything is a searched for event. And in doing so, a standalone piece of content like a simple video recording of Billy Graham's crusade will only be found by someone looking for someone or for something associated with those keywords or following a person who posts it. This plays out in two ways for the Christian. Either post things with as many Christian tags and labels to utilize SEO, search engine optimization, or share things that are created by Christians to better include them with the arbitrage of content on the internet. The first is something I think any content creator should be conscious of as a Christian. Posting things so they can be found is important. Something about hiding a lamp under a basket. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand so that it gives light to all the house. Matthew 5:15 ESV. But the second is something that Christians don't do. You can ask any unbeliever you know to come to your church. You can't ask any unbeliever you know to come to church with you online because it's not a real place. One that they can be brought to or that they can see on a regular basis, like a steepled building with a cross at the top on the main street of town. You can mean to go to a store on Sunday and walk past a church, but when you Google something, you're looking for that thing, not the local church service clickbaiting you into a live stream of their Sunday service. But if every sermon preached at your church was recorded well and posted with the right keyboards, it could be shared to the same effect as dragging your friend to church over and over until the word of God is preached there finally speaks to their lives. Imagine every Christian posting the weekly sermon in their Facebook newsfeed on a Sunday after every church service. Eventually, the topics of those sermons and the spiritual needs of their Facebook friends would coincide. Imagine if every Christian posted their testimony and how it has changed and grown each year on Facebook. Eventually, those stories of love and forgiveness and grace would touch people in the way they're used to touching their screens. Evangelism online isn't an event like a real world where two people meet and where a sermon is preached. It's a content-driven process where the internet craves content. Content is king in the meritocracy of the web. The cleaner the recording, the better the audio, the clearer the graphics, all factors in capturing the fickle attention of an unbeliever scrolling through a newsfeed. This is where the sending of the saints to the share button needs to happen. If a congregations aren't encouraged to share those sermons or post those testimonies, then the point is moot. There is a vastness of reach to the internet that the church could fill if it is only sent like Paul admonishes in the passage from Romans. Facebook, as of 2016, has over 200 million users in North America. What do you think would happen if every Christian with a smartphone, webcam, or digital camera posted their testimony on Easter Sunday, publicly sharing the combined work of Christ, one of the largest congregations ever possible? That's the power of online evangelism. But it won't happen organically. It needs to happen en masse, real-life, viral video movement, not one video reaching millions, but of millions of videos, each reaching that one person who needs to hear it. That one person who can relate to the grace that an abortionist needs, to the love that a child of a broken home has felt, to the faith of a former atheist found. The power of online video could change the world and usher in the next great revival of the church, but only if people are sent to share the good news. What won't work is the dreaded concept of Christian clickbait. And I have to admit I'm a bit biased as I write this, but I've yet to see a gospel tract work in real life. I'm worried that the churches using clickbait will be the lame Christian t-shirts ripping off popular culture and risking trademark lawsuits of the internet age. Simply put, saying something is one thing when it's really something else is lying. Not marketing or savvy SEO, it's a sin, one that God hates enough to list twice in the list of 7 things that he hates. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run into evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. Proverbs 6:16-19. We need to post the stories that matter, and not the schemes that we think will bring in the most web traffic. Like real life, our job isn't conviction or even conversion. It's proclamation. Let's keep it that way. That chapter got changed a lot in the last couple of years. It doesn't even touch on what's being called discovery algorithms, or in a video that I'll talk about later on in the week, the persuasion technologies that are currently being used. I mean, most people who are accessing online right now, because of how popular the apps are using a vertical video feed in like TikTok or Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts, where that whole paradigm has changed, where you no longer search for these things and then watch the things that you searched for, watch the things you subscribe to. Now algorithms are trying to figure out what you want to see and showing you what you react to most. My biggest push on this kind of stuff is that is not you using the internet, that's the internet using you. That's the internet using you to gain information to be able to use your reactions for ad revenue generation and product placement. These discovery algorithms are very dangerous, and I'm going to be doing a talk with Doug Smith. He's a software developer for Covenant Eyes a couple days from now, so hopefully you can see this. But yeah, those discovery algorithms, those are problematic because it does mark a definite change in the internet. The chapter I wrote really represented an internet pre-TikTok, if that makes sense. And without those discovery algorithms, what that's doing, what the internet we had there at least made sense. It was that agency ingrained in everything. And maybe the people who designed the major parts of the internet picked up on that we had too much agency, we had too much control in the environment. Something to think about. But I do think that still is in place. And I do think that, a church, especially a big church, if a big church could take even half of its members and all share their testimonies at the same time on the same day, Good Friday, everyone shares their testimony at 8 o'clock in the morning, and everyone has a hashtag for their church, that you would just have this explosion of content that everyone would see on their feeds and all be able to relate back to a real in-person place that they could then engage with the gospel for the first time. I really do think there's a strategy in there. I've yet to see it executed online. It's kind of hard thing to organize that kind of stuff, but that's what it is. And so that section of the book is definitely changing. Discovery algorithms are definitely dangerous and changing the landscape, and really not something that we're contending well with as theologians and as Christians and as churches. So we'll kind of go from there. So chapter 5, hope you guys liked it.